My hot take is that most product managers neglect data, and not because they don't like data, because I think you need to have passion for a product and also want to know a lot about it, but they do that because of lack of time and skills sometimes. But it leads to wrong priorities and perhaps wrong conclusions and decisions. Of course, everybody should be data-driven on all decisions, but that's simply not possible. And the biggest disease, I think, in my field of work is analysis paralysis.
Hello and welcome to another episode of One Night in Product Hot Takes Edition, where I speak to one person about one thing, get straight to the point, and find out what's on their mind. Now, if you've got something on your mind, why not head over to onenightinproduct.com/hot, where you can find a time, book a slot, we can have a chat and share your opinions with the world. In any case, do remember to head over to onenightinproduct.com in general so you can find all of my past episodes, as well as links to the podcast and all your favourite podcast platforms and YouTube, so you can make sure to share, like, subscribe, and make sure you never miss another episode again. Anyway, enough of me, let's get straight to Martijn Moret's hot take. Alright, so in front of me I see a half-smiling face in a fairly beige room with an emergency exit door right behind him, so if the interview starts to go poorly, I'm sure he'll be jumping straight out there. But I'm going to throw over to you and ask you what your name is, where you're based, what you do, and most importantly, what's your hot take?
Okay, thanks, Jason. My name is Martijn Moret, and the room is fairly beige, I would say, but the location is Singapore, very exciting and buzzing. I usually spend my time around Asia, but I'm leading a completely remote company in data analysis using AI. And as we know, AI uses a lot of hallucinations. You can't use that just like that for data. So I try to solve that for managers of all kinds of industries and skill sets. And my hot take is, of course, related to that. My hot take is that most product managers neglect data, and not because they don't like data, because I think you need to have passion for a product and also want to know a lot about it, but they do that because of lack of time and skills sometimes. But it leads to wrong priorities and perhaps wrong conclusions and decisions.
All right, so obviously, if you go online and you kind of read all the standard thought leaders, then data's almost at the forefront of everything, right? Like everyone's talking about being either data informed or data obsessed or data driven or data whatever. And I want to come back to the AI thing in a minute, because I actually tried to do some AI data analysis this morning and it went very poorly. But going back to that initial point, like, do you see it as being data driven? Do you see it as being data informed? Do you think it as being data something else? Like, how much should people be using data to drive versus inform their decision making?
Yeah, so of course, everybody should be data-driven on all decisions, but that's simply not possible. And the biggest disease, I think, in my field of work is analysis paralysis, which basically means there's so much data in your inbox in all kinds of files. You know, user engagement data, user demographics, conversion funnels, customer feedback, A/B results. I don't know what kind of data you can think of, but we see everything passing by. It's simply impossible to analyze that all, but you can make choices to put priorities. And I always use for myself, of course, we're data driven as a data analysis company, but I use the 80-20 rule here. It's like, is 20% of my time that I spent on this really gonna make an impact for 80%? So I'm doing that by asking questions before I see the data. I know a little bit about what the data is about, and then I'm going to ask the questions so I immediately can see. And then to avoid analysis paralysis and doom scrolling in data analysis, I simply stick to my questions. And if I have more questions, I schedule that for another time.
But what room is there then for more kind of exploratory data analysis, as in, like you say, there's data everywhere, and especially these days, there's more data than ever before, and it just keeps growing and keeps growing, and now we might even have to worry about synthetic data as well somehow. But like this idea that you've got so much data, and sure, like if you know the question that you want to go and ask it, then you can start trying to work out how to ask that question. But is there some kind of joy about almost like, exploring the jungle and just trying to work out like what animals are in there? Or do you think that it's always important to sort of start up front with some kind of question that you want to answer?
So exploratory is needed because you want to know what the data can give you, right? It's a bit of a I call it a minefield or a gold mine, whatever you want to, whatever you're analyzing. But the main problem, of course, of getting into wasting too much time on data is that it takes a lot of time to clean data. It takes a lot of time to get your feel and your hands around data, the exploratory bit. And then most of the times it's data from a certain system, which is quite immediately already a siloed system, right? And we're talking about ad hoc data here, not the pretty dashboards that some engineer thought of probably a year ago that you can now use to get some ideas about what you want to know. But it takes a long time to get to a point where you really see some stuff. So I think it's great to know beforehand what you want to know. But hey, if in the meantime you gather more questions, it's your choice to reschedule those ones or simply go after it. And I do this for. In my previous company, it's an aviation data. We did hardware and software and support and IT platforms and user journeys and a lot. I lost myself also in that data. That's one of the reasons I built the current platform, because I spend most of the time literally trying to get to know the data and that together with AI is literally a lot of time saved. But of course, it will never never at this moment, it will never give you an answer to all the questions. In the end, it's a language model and not a statistical calculation model.
Yeah, well, you keep tempting me to start the AI thing, but just before we do that, I have another question around this idea of like, okay, so you've got a question, you've got a hypothesis you want to test, you've got some kind of, maybe some idea about like where to go and find the data for that, and maybe even the methods that you'd use to interrogate it and the types of reports that you might use to validate that. But it makes me think a little bit of the same problems that you have with, for example, user interviews and stuff like that, where you're basically in a situation where you're so confident that you know the question that you also get a little bit confident that you know what the answer might be. And you start almost trying to overfit the data to support that answer versus actually going where the data takes you. So is that something that you think is a big concern? Do you think it's easy to like not do that? Like, how would you recommend people that are exploring the space around their question don't end up kind of just almost proving themselves right by default?
Absolutely. A personal being aware of the fact that you have a personal bias and even a personal idea about where something might lead to is already half the way. But that's why making the questions really open and also specific is there, because what I see a lot is that people are just looking after averages, right? They've got a couple of vanity metrics like conversion to paid, and then they are doing averages, and they take this as the rule for the whole, as an outcome that they can use in the rest of the world. And that is not at all what data analysis is about. You need to be able to play around with the data, and the question should be open enough. Instead of asking, hey, what kind of users are most likely to convert to paid subscriptions, you might ask, where do they come from, or what is their intention? And that's a much harder question to answer, actually, and allows and forces you to actually play around with the data.
All right, so I'll buy that. But now let's talk about the AI side of the equation, which obviously is what you're doing with your day job these days as well. Now, again, I did some analysis earlier. It was basically, it wasn't even really analysis, to be honest. It was kind of data conversion from one horrible format into another format so I could start playing with it in Excel, which is, still the king of data analysis tools. But
absolutely,
it completely, well, obviously, but and every single tool should integrate with it just to kind of save themselves some pain and some building later. But it failed the job horribly and like only process half the data or whatever. And it kind of touches on that point that you raised earlier about the fact that these language models aren't really optimized for data analysis per se, because of course they're based on word prediction, not numeric data analysis. Now, obviously, there are additional models and thinking engines and stuff that they put on this as well. But what types of question do you feel that sort of current generation AI is actually most optimized for answering? Like, is it just anything, or are there certain types of analysis that you can maybe optimize for using more of these sort of AI systems that we've got these days?
So what AI systems do in terms of data analysis is they write little Python programs to actually calculate the results, right?
Yep.
And to be able to write little Python programs, and I'm not sure if you're a programmer, Jason, but
oh yeah, I've written my share of Python programs in my time.
That's great, but it also takes knowledge of context before
Yep.
you know something. Otherwise, you're actually starting out with a bug, and then you're calculating statistics based on the bug, and based on that, you get really weird results. So literally, we are using AI not for any statistical operation. We're literally doing the statistics ourselves, and then we're using AI to humanize answers, because there are many people who are great with data looking in a table. I think you're one of them, because you're trying to enrich it yourself or transform it yourself. Then there's people who are very good with charts. They are looking at lines. The visual interpretation is very great on that. And then there are people who are neither table nor visuals. They just need text. They need to know 80% of all the users are spending just 20% of the revenue, or something like that. So AI is very useful in humanizing and making accessible those things, but it's not at all suitable at this moment to rely any big decision on, unless you have had someone look at it. Because even statistics, if we're looking at simple stuff like medians or averages, or a little bit more correlations, time series analysis, they all have very strict rules of what you can do with it and what you cannot do with it. And unless you ask your AI model to actually adhere to those rules and exactly do the cleaning and the stuff that you want, and for that you need to know the data already, there is going to be a very big chance that you're getting the wrong answer. So don't rely on that. And anyway, playing around with data, it requires to build a little bit of skills. You still need those. But my biggest takeaway for using AI data analysis is that it goes extremely fast. What took me 4 hours before, especially if you have 1,000+ rows, I can now do in 5 minutes. I've got 12 charts. Half of them I'm not going to use because they're simply not that exciting. But I have my first initial analysis already done. And what I said in the beginning, we have so much data there, but it's all siloed. Your customer data just contains an email address or a user ID, but it doesn't contain any gender, any age group, maybe any previous user journeys, whether you're a power user or that. So the power of AI data analysis is not so much in the simple things, if you're already able to do that, but it's more about combining stuff and then asking it for interesting insights that are there. But to be very honest, my company, we're using AI to humanize data. We're throwing away more than 50% of all the answers that we get, simply because we can't recognize the answer, the data and the answer back to what we calculated ourselves.
Yeah, it's funny, like, the kind of the PS to the story about like trying to get that data out earlier is I actually then did work with ChatGPT to, quickly write a Python program, just described the format and said, hey, can you make me a Python program to do this? And did the usual kind of back and forth, 5 times or whatever. And then eventually had something that did exactly what I needed. So like I got there in the end, but it kind of does touch on that point that you said around this idea, like it can get you some of the way there, but you still need to know basically what you're doing. And of course, I could still have written that program myself manually if I wanted to. It just helped me make it quicker. But that point that you said around ultimately not necessarily being able to rely on it and still needing that human touch on and sort of humanizing the data, it's kind of at odds of what you're seeing from some vendors out there and also some commentators out there that are like, yeah, like we're just about to be able to automate everyone's jobs away because AI can do everything. I'm assuming that you don't believe that.
No, we're far from it. I never. I believe that language models are not the technology that's going to lead us to more intelligence than simply text prediction. The big stories, even from the big guys, are more investor, let's say investor-led optimism, I would say, and valuation, because they have been looking for a lot of money and a lot of against a huge valuation. And you see, actually, there's one concept in data analysis: is the law of the diminishing returns. You see this happening at this moment with ChatGPT as well. And if you, as a product manager, by the way, don't know what the law of diminishing returns is, I would recommend everyone to look at that, because it will make your life much easier. It doesn't matter that you don't spend your time on optimizing it to the last pixel. It's all about getting to the next breakthrough, right?
Absolutely. But then let's talk a little bit about, I mean, you kind of touched on it earlier, the idea of like hallucinations, right? This idea that, of course, these models, whilst amazing, and again, for everyone's knowledge, I use these things all the time. I'm definitely not a skeptic, but they definitely have their boundaries. And one of those boundaries are hallucinations. And this idea that basically it's not always going to pump out the right thing. Now, if I'm just writing out a funny script or like doing a nice little picture for a presentation or something, that's one thing. But if I'm analyzing loads of data to try to help me make a decision, even if I'm going to go and check that data, there's still this risk. And I see this also, frankly, with kind of transcriptions even. There's this risk that's going to miss something, or it's going to get something slightly wrong but still look credible. So how do you see that playing out? And maybe even for you, like as someone that works in this space, how do you try and sort of prevent that or flag the impact?
This is not new with AI, by the way, because people were always making up all kinds of statistics, right? The famous quote is big lies, small lies, and statistics.
We don't need AI to make up statistics now.
Exactly. So what I do, and also the reason that for example, I like tables and I like to see the visuals and I like to humanize, but I always go back to the source and see where it comes from and how it was derived. Because if you're not a critical thinker in that sense, whatever someone says, you can just take for granted. And hopefully, I would say most of us professionals are developing some critical thinking skills, because there's so much. You mentioned it already before. Synthetic data. I would also call it fabricated data. There's so much data around us, and then by making it humanize, it look actually very intelligent. You need to develop and question every bit of data, even from your own systems and your own organization. Otherwise, the decision will be very, very poor. And I am curious by nature, I guess, and that is one super skill that all product managers should have as well, of course.
All right. So what do you see then, maybe over the next 6, 12, 18 months? I mean, there are some people out there now saying that these models have peaked and that they themselves are getting to the law of diminishing returns themselves, and that like just throwing more compute at it isn't going to be the thing. Maybe there's going to be some other kind of workflow stuff that they can do around it, or other kind of agents that they can throw into it, or thinking engines or whatever, like basically different approaches to try to get the most juice out of these things that don't rely on, for example, just continuously enhancing and upgrading the models. What do you see happening in the data analytics space over the next sort of 6 to 18 months?
Yeah, so it is an enabler actually to have people with very low skills still use data to analyze data themselves, right? Because it makes it much easier to actually get access to the data, to more or less automatically do cleaning without formulas, without Python programs and other stuff. So I see it having a role in that. We are using it for context determination and for outlier analysis, and all this kind of functionality is in there, and you can use it. It's just so in the data analysis space, my feeling is that the tools are becoming much more user friendly. Because let's face it, Tableau, Power BI are very powerful tools, or Excel are very powerful tools, but the real power is only accessible for the happy few. 15% in case of Tableau or Power BI is even less of the total workforce or professionals. So we will see a lot of more human tools and a lot of more, I would say, beyond dashboard data analysis, because nobody wants a dashboard. You always want to dive in. You want to segment stuff. You want to combine different data to see what is coming out of it, because you need to find the next best niche, right? If you compare the early SaaS days, software as a subscription, there are big companies there, and everybody was jumping at it because it was a wonderful concept to get you something very fast. And you see them more and more going into a niche added with knowledge of the domain, and that is where data analysis and AI come together is we're going to add domain knowledge. Hopefully, we're not going to rely on hallucinations too much. And we're going to have very fast ways of producing and sharing insights that are in the data. And but still, the human touch will be required. I'm a pilot. I'm from the aviation industry. Before I'm a pilot, I don't know if I would ever go in, sit in an aircraft that is navigating by AI.
LLM powered aeroplane.
I'm not sure if I would do that. Nor would I trust an analysis tool to fully independently from humans do my data. The technology is simply not there. We need different technology, which is very different from the transformer large language model based technology right now.
Well, fingers crossed that we'll get there over the next few months and years. I'm sure there are plenty of people working on it. But like your central hypothesis was that product managers need to be better at this stuff. I guess one way they could get better at this stuff is maybe come and connect with you after this and kind of share some stories or get some advice or hints or tips or check out your company. So where can they come and find you after this if they would like to do just that?
So the best way to find me is LinkedIn. My name is pretty unique. There are a couple of more, but is there? And or just look for DataSquirrel. Of course, I'm there. I'm always willing to help or get people up to speed with their data challenges. I think for product managers, the most important stuff is get your act together right now to actually try out tools and to try out to see what is data. Because if you have been neglecting it because you don't have the time or you think you don't have the skills, start doing it, because otherwise you're going to be taken over by this young dude that actually knows how to use the tools.
Yeah, fair enough. And no one wants to get overtaken. Not quite yet. Anyway, we've got the robots to worry about. We don't want to worry about our colleagues as well. Absolutely. Well, I'll make sure to link that all into the show notes anyway, and hopefully you get a few people popping in your direction. But no, as for now, thanks very much for your hot take.
Thank you very much, Jason. Nice to talk to you.